Hello, and welcome to the Good Food Program. Your host is Cindy Cesena, the Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program Assistant for Lake County, Ronan, Montana. These programs are designed to help families with children use USDA and other inexpensive foods to prepare tasty, nutritious, attractive meals that are low in cost. The recipes will be put on the screen later, so keep a pencil and paper handy. Videotapes of these programs are available at the FNEP office in Lake County and other Extension Service offices in Montana and the Salish Kootenai College Library in Pablo.
Today we have as our guest Dr. Andrea Pagenkopf from Montana State University, and we're going to talk about diabetes, and she's the food and nutrition specialist from the university. And we're going to cook some stuff too.
Yes. The topic of diabetes, I think, is one that needs to be discussed because there are a lot of people who have primarily the type of diabetes one gets after adulthood. And so in order to try to minimize the problems from that kind of diabetes, it's important to keep the blood sugar level at a normal level all day long. In other words, to keep it from going very high and then going very low. And in order to do that, one has to consume a proper diet. And so today we're going to talk about some things that will fit into a diet that helps to control the blood sugar level, but also is good to eat.
Yeah, and they're good to eat for people that don't have diabetes as well.
That's right. This can fit into anyone's diet, but especially good. And one of the problems, one of the complications of diabetes and this change in blood sugar level is that heart disease is more prevalent in people with diabetes. And it's felt that if we can keep that blood sugar level more normal, that there will be fewer complications such as heart disease and such as kidney disease. And so it's very important to attempt to keep that blood sugar level normal and not let it fluctuate all over the place. So we're going to find some things that will help to do that.
And the first thing that we're going to cook will be a Swiss steak dish. And the first thing we're going to do with that is cut the fat off of it. And there isn't very much on this at all, but we'll get rid of it anyway.
Yeah. It's very nice now to see that so little fat being left on meat. So you're not paying for that, and the little bit you have to cut off isn't going to add too much.
I already had at this too.
All right. All right.
And maybe you could explain about snacking too.
Well, in order to keep the blood sugar level normal, the body has to get fuel on a regular basis. And the time that we normally have between meals may not be enough time, or maybe too much time, for the blood sugar level to be normal. And so for diabetic people, often they are encouraged not only to eat 3 meals a day, which are very important, but also to snack several times a day. Breakfast is going to be very important because a person is going to have gone a long time without anything to eat or without any fuel by breakfast time. And so it's important to eat regularly, not to skip a meal, and to have snacks that help keep the blood sugar normal.
Yeah. What kinds of things are good for snacks?
Well, in order to keep the blood sugar normal, of course, you don't want to have sugar for a snack because sugar will tend to increase the blood sugar level. And so things that are not sweet are the best snack kinds of foods, such as cheese, crackers, meat-type snack, fruits, vegetables, would all be appropriate as snacks. But try to keep away from any of the sweeter things, such as dried fruit, for example, because that would tend to cause a problem with the blood glucose level.
And you were saying that if they are going to have sweets of any kind, that after a meal is the better
right.
time to do it.
The thing to strive for with control of blood sugar is not to have it absorbed very quickly from the stomach and from the intestines. And in order to do that, you eat it with other food. And so the best time to have something sweet is at the end of a meal, because at that time then less of it will be absorbed quickly. Therefore, the blood sugar level will stay at a normal level.
Okay. What I've done with this so far is put a 1/4 cup of flour in here and about a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder and a teaspoon of salt and a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. Mix that all up and then dredge the steak in it. And then they say pound it with a wooden mallet.
What kind kind of steak are you using?
This is round steak.
Round steak.
Yeah, and this turns out to be a good buy if you can get it on sale, and this is just the top portion of it. So there would be about this much left for another meal for 6 people. And you can cut it that way, and like the next time you could do a stir fry or any number of things. And we're going to beat it up because that'll make it more tender. And you can do this with like that. Or what I actually prefer, and most, I know everybody has one of these, is like that.
And there are other cuts of meat that would be appropriate for this too, don't you think, Cindy?
I think chuck would work just fine.
Chuck, and then wild meat would be
Yeah.
excellent for wild meat if people have their own wild meat.
Yeah.
And you want something that's more tender. This is a good recipe to help
Yeah.
tenderize a tough piece of meat.
Yeah, like elk steaks or deer.
Sure,
Probably work on buffalo.
I would think so.
Let me get the oil going in the frying pan first. Before you want to keep pounding on it while I'm doing it?
Okay, sure. What this does is just break down those tough fibers so that they're going to be easier to chew, and it tends to break them apart. So it seems to be more tender. And then another thing that helps to tenderize this is that it is cooked for quite a long time with moist heat, and that helps. And as you can see, we've cut so much of the fat off of this that the juices left over from this are going to be very low in fat, and then can be used also in the whatever way we're going to use them when we get ready to eat.
We could make a gravy with this when it's all done, and it wouldn't have hardly any fat in it at all.
So that's good news that you don't have to give up gravy in order to follow a moderate fat diet that's good for diabetics.
Yeah,
But you have to
actually
make sure
be a
you
lot
get most
better
of
off
the
than
fat
putting
off.
a bunch of butter
That's
on a
right.
potato or something.
That's right.
Okay, that'll just take a minute to heat up.
Okay, think
And
that's
I'll-
good enough?
Yeah, that looks good. Okay, I'll whack it into 6 pieces. One. It'll come out to be 6. You'll see.
I hope everybody won't fight if they don't all get the same size.
Is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Whoops.
And how much did this
Let's-
weigh?
This is just a pound.
1 pound.
Okay. And so the whole steak cost $4, but that's only $2 for this meal, and it would feed 6 people because it's going to have the carrots and green pepper and onions, and if it was served with potatoes or noodles or something like
Sure.
that, would go pretty far. Okay, let's see how we're doing over here.
This could also be done with a pork, piece of pork, because pork is very lean, and with the fat cut off of it, it would be appropriate to use in this way. Pork usually is more tender than beef, for example, or some other meats, but it would be very good fixed this way. So I think that whatever you happen to have access to, or whatever might be on special, would be a good thing to use for this dish.
And you could do the same thing with commodity beef, only just, don't dredge it with flour first. Just put it in the pan and then put all the vegetables and seasonings on it, I think.
Is it pretty lean, the commodity
Yeah,
beef?
it's not bad. Especially if you put it in the refrigerator overnight before you're going to use it, and then when you open up the can, there'll be fat on the top, and just take that and throw it.
That's an easy way to get rid of
Give
the
it to your
fat.
dog.
Okay, then what, this browns and...
Yeah, that's the idea. It'll get there. Okay, and we'll brown this, and then we'll add some onions in to brown with it, and then we'll carry on with the rest of the recipe.
Okay, one of the things that is a disadvantage with diabetes is that diabetic people do have a higher incidence of heart disease. And that's part of the reason why it's recommended that they be very careful about the amount of fat in the diet, because it's thought that the amount of fat in the diet, especially the saturated fat, is related to the blood cholesterol level. And we know that people that have high levels of blood cholesterol are more prone to heart disease. And so by cutting the fat off this meat and by skimming fat off, we are keeping the fat level to a moderate level so that it is appropriate for people who are at higher risk for heart disease. And unfortunately, that's true of diabetics.
And for diabetics, it's just as important to get a lot of fiber as it is for many other
Yes, fiber is
diet
important
problems.
because not only does fiber help with the gastrointestinal tract to keep it healthy, but fiber also helps to slow down the absorption of whatever you eat. And so if we can slow down the absorption of the sugar, it doesn't have as much effect on the blood sugar level. So fiber is important from two standpoints. And there is going to be fiber in this dish because we have vegetables. And vegetables are a good source of fiber. Also tend to reduce blood cholesterol levels. And so the combination of the lean meat and the vegetables is going to be a very healthy one for someone with diabetes or for someone who doesn't have diabetes but just wants a healthy diet.
Yeah. Now we're getting somewhere with that. And I put a tablespoon of oil in this pan. I think we were talking while I did it. And I'll put the onions in on the side here to start browning while the meat's finishing being browned. And Andrea was telling me that if you add the tomatoes later after the meat's cooked for about an hour, then it won't. If you add them now, the meat will get tough. But if you wait for about an hour, then they won't.
Anything
So
that
that's
has
good in
acid,
stews or beans or.
you want to add the acid things later because they tend the acid vegetables such as tomatoes or other acid. If you have lemon juice as part of the recipe, will tend to make the meat tougher.
Is that true with fish?
It probably won't make that much difference with fish because fish is so tender in the first place. But certainly with
you
beef
don't
or
cook it
pork
that long.
or wild meat, it would be true.
Okay. And I know what I wanted to ask you about diabetes and pregnancy. There's a special type of diabetes that people get just when they're pregnant?
Some women develop what's known as gestational diabetes. And that means that they develop diabetes when they become pregnant. And then they have to be very careful with their diet and make sure that they eat all the right things so that their blood sugar level remains normal. Because if it doesn't, it can have drastic effects on the developing baby. And so that's something that if someone is diabetic anyway and becomes pregnant, they should have very close prenatal care throughout the whole pregnancy. However, some people who are not diabetic will go into a pregnancy and develop what we call gestational diabetes. In many cases, when the baby is delivered, the diabetes is no longer a problem. But they need very, very close supervision and very strict diet. And it's important for them to eat several times a day to make sure that fuel level stays at a good level.
Well, you mostly want to do that when you're pregnant anyway.
Well, it's not a bad idea,
reasons,
right?
yeah.
So it works out very well. One of the things that I think is important too is when we look at a recipe like this, it takes a long time to cook, and is one of those things that people will do often on the weekends if you happen to work, is that you can make extra and freeze it, and then have it left over for another time, and all that's needed is to warm it up.
That's a good idea too. It could be served with rice too.
Yes, rice would be fine.
So now we're coming.
Mentioned potatoes would be a possibility, and noodles, whatever you happen to like that it tends to be starchy. And this would be appropriate again for a diabetic. The starches are appropriate. We have the carbohydrates we divide into complex and simple. And the simple carbohydrates are the sugars, which diabetics are discouraged from using. But the complex carbohydrates are such things as potatoes and noodles and rice, which diabetics are encouraged to eat because in many cases they provide not only nutrients and energy, but also some fiber. And again, fiber being important from the standpoint of slowing down the absorption of the sugar.
Well, fiber does a lot of good things for you just all the way around. I know all the TV commercials now, they're all saying fiber, fiber, fiber.
Right, and it is important, but one of the things that I like to emphasize is that fiber is not only important of itself. If you want to just buy fiber in a jar or in a tablet, some people are doing that. But there are different kinds of fiber, and different fibers do different things in the body. And so the most healthy thing to do is to get fiber from a variety of different foods. Then you also get the nutrients from the foods and the benefit of the fiber. And so I would encourage, rather than the pill approach, to eat the foods that taste good and make the food much more nutritious, and then also provide the fiber.
Well, weren't they even making bread out of wood sticks and stuff for a while?
On the label, it was labeled as cellulose.
Yeah, and
but it was actually ground up sawdust. And there's nothing wrong. The human digestive tract will not digest that, and so it did just pass on through. But it didn't seem to have the positive effect that some of the other fibers have. Yeah. So it was not a beneficial thing, and I don't think anyone's using sawdust anymore.
Let's hope not. Okay, and this is a half a cup of beef broth that I'm putting on there. And this is made from bouillon, which has quite a bit of salt in it. So I don't know, I would have left the salt out of that, because this probably would have covered it. And then we'll put the peppers on. Because we're short on time, I'm going to go ahead and do the whole thing all at once.
Okay. And it's starting to smell good now. And not only does it smell good, it's so colorful.
Looks pretty.
It looks nice.
And that's a little over 2 cups, but I couldn't see putting back that much of a carrot. So it doesn't exactly mean 2 cups. And we'll put the tomatoes in now, even though no, that's not the way to do it.
We have strong teeth today, so we'll manage.
And you could add whatever herb you wanted to this, too. I was thinking a little thyme might be kind of nice in it. Oops. You got me.
This is one of those recipes you can sort of do your own thing with. You can add whatever vegetables you really like.
Okay, that's about a teaspoon of thyme. And put that on top. There, now it really smells good. Okay, that's about all for that dish. The last dish that we're going to do today is a dessert called peach cobbler, and we figured this would be a good time to talk about the sugars and artificial sweeteners and desserts in general and how they affect people on diabetes.
I think it's important for people with diabetes to understand that they can have dessert. It's important to prepare it correctly and to use maybe some special ingredients, because anything that is very, very sweet that uses sugar may not be appropriate for a diabetic. But today we're going to use some artificial sweetener, we're going to use some fruit, and it's going to be a very tasty dessert and one that anyone in the family should enjoy.
Okay, first we're going to put in 3 cups of canned peaches, and these were canned in pear juice. I couldn't find the artificially sweetened ones, but...
And these peaches, if you only get peaches, for example, that are in heavy syrup,
the USDA peaches are
the
like this.
commodity peaches, then it's okay to use those, but a good thing to do would be to rinse them with water to get that extra sugar off of them before you use them, and then they won't be quite as sweet.
I think sometimes they're so sticky sweet that that'd be a good idea in general.
I don't think it detracts that much from them by rinsing them with water.
Okay. And then a tablespoon of cornstarch. And where are we here? And 2 teaspoons of the artificial sweetener.
And this one happens to be saccharin, which is one of the 3 artificial sweeteners that are now available.
I didn't know which one to buy. It just said artificial sweetener.
Right.
How did they know?
This is the appropriate one
Oh,
because
that's good.
it can be cooked. The NutraSweet or the aspartame will not survive the cooking process. And so it would be a poor one to use in a dish like this. There's also a brand new one, and I haven't seen it on the market yet, but the name of it is Sunette, and it will survive the cooking process. So either saccharin or Sunette would be fine, and the aspartame or the NutraSweet would not work.
Is that Sunette the one that they're talking about that they say bakeries and people like that are going to start using, and everybody's all excited because there won't be any calories, but it'll be wonderfully decadent anyway?
It's a good artificial sweetener and will probably be used for a lot of things. I think it's only approved right now for dry things, like dry drink mixes and that sort of thing. It's not approved for soft drinks, but probably will be before long.
Okay, and half a teaspoon of cinnamon, and that was 2 teaspoons of the artificial sweetener. And we mix that all up. And you can just mix it right in a pan. You don't need a bowl for it. Just kind of
It's always good
Moosh
to be
it
able to
around.
do that and avoid dirtying all the dishes in the kitchen.
yes.
And the cornstarch will make it nice and thick and juicy.
Yeah, sort of like a peach pie. And I would imagine you could use fresh peaches with this. With no trouble.
Absolutely. They would be wonderful.
Or apples. Okay, and then the topping is how much? 3 slices of whole wheat bread made into breadcrumbs, which works really slick in a blender if you've got it, but if you don't, you can go like this.
Forever.
And 1/3 of a cup of non-fat dry milk, just the plain crystals. Let's get my fork here.
And this obviously is so much lower in fat than a pie crust, which is what you normally might have, or a sort of biscuit type crust. And so this is going to end up to be very low calorie, but be very much like a cobbler that you normally would make.
Yeah, the calories, they say 111 a serving. That's not bad at all. And a tablespoon of flour. And 4 teaspoons of the artificial sweetener. And this comes in brown sugar flavor too,
That's what I understand.
which I was thinking might go good in this, but I didn't get it.
It would though, and the whole wheat bread looks like it might be
Whoops.
oatmeal or something mixed up with sugar. It's kind of attractive, I think. And
Well,
it's,
could you put oats in there too?
you could, sure, you could add some oats. It is certainly a good way to use leftover bread. And white bread would work also, but whole wheat is just a little more nutritious. But if you've got it left over.
Okay. And a 1/4. Did I put the cinnamon in already?
Cinnamon's in this one, but
This
I don't
one
think
gets,
it's in
yeah,
that
it
one.
is too. It's right there.
Right, but it's
Just not as much.
Yeah.
1/4. And then 1 tablespoon of water. And this is 1 tablespoon of melted margarine.
okay, and that's the only fat that's in this whole recipe.
Yeah.
So, not only was the meat one a low-fat recipe, but this one also is, and neither of them
And
has
they're going to taste
sugar.
just as good as anything.
They're going
that
to
was
be
fat.
wonderful.
That's the neat thing, is that there are so many different ways of cooking things now. You don't have to eat the fat. You know, the old days, like my grandmother used to cook vegetables in a pot forever. You know, green beans and then throw out the water.
Right, and often then put either bacon fat or butter on them. It's
Yeah.
for the flavor, and we need to get away from that. If we
Okay.
worked as hard as your grandmother did, we might be able to get away with
Got a
that.
point there, too. Okay, and then you put this in a 400-degree oven for 30 minutes. And that's all about it on that one.
Okay, one of the things we talked about a little earlier was, can we prevent diabetes? is there anything you can do to keep from getting diabetes? And for the adult type diabetes, it seems that it's hereditary for one thing. But one of the complicating factors is overweight. And so people who are overweight are more apt to get it at an earlier age.
Which can also be hereditary.
Right. The tendency to be overweight is also inherited. And so the thing that we recommend to people is try from early in your life to control your weight, keep it at a normal level, and then your chance of getting diabetes is going to be lower, or at least you won't get it as soon as you would if in fact you were overweight from very early in life. And so it's an incentive. If there's diabetes in your family, there's certainly a strong incentive to maintain a normal weight throughout life to hopefully avoid diabetes, but if not to avoid it, to wait until you're much older before you have to start being very restrictive with diet or in fact take a drug to control it.
Good. Thank you very much for being my guest today.
It's been
This was
my
really
pleasure.
neat. You can come back anytime.
All right. I'll be here for the eating.
Okay. These are the two things that we made today. This is the Swiss steak, and it's served with a potato and a salad. And the juices could have been thickened with flour to make gravy to put on the potato. And here's the peach cobbler, and we put a drop of yogurt on there. And thank you again for being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I wanted to mention that on the salad, I think most people like salad dressing, but there are a lot of low-fat salad dressings available now that would be appropriate to put on here. And so you've got a very low-fat, low-sugar meal that's high in fiber and high in nutrients.
Yeah.